Hi, and welcome to the Bruce News, the place for all things volunteer. I'm Nancy McCammon Hansen, coming to you from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we are welcoming today Ambre Marr, who works in our Indiana office. She is the Senior State Associate State Director for Advocacy, and Jina Ragland, the Senior Associate State Director for Advocacy in Nebraska, and Jessica Kinser, who is the Associate State Director for Communications in Nebraska. The AARP State Office in Nebraska and the Indiana AARP State Office have worked to implement actions to protect consumers from cryptocurrency, and these occur in kiosk schemes. And so we thank those states that are working on this issue for their work. And today we're going to hear from the Nebraska office and the Indiana office about what is being done. But before we do that, I'd like to have Ambre, Jina, and Jessica share a little about themselves and what they do for AARP in total, and specifically. So let's start with Ambre. Ambre, can you explain what your job entails?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Nancy. So I am, as you mentioned, the Senior ASD for Advocacy here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And we focus on issues that really affect older adults, especially around empowering caregivers, safeguarding Hoosiers from frauds and scams, which is something that we're talking about today. And we do that through education, community engagement, and then advocacy through individuals and volunteers, and just making sure that people can prevent, or at least if not prevent, then report their scams, but also enhancing community livability and safety for all Hoosiers across the board. So my role really is about helping to translate what's happening on the ground into policies that make a difference at the state house and beyond. So that really means with working with legislators, community partners, to ensure that people have the information and protections that they need. I also am the co-lead for our volunteer legislative team. We have about 20 individuals from across the state that come to Indianapolis every other Monday during session and join me at the State House to advocate on behalf of AARP Indiana's priorities. And just sort of a little bit of background, when we do that, Indiana is a part-time legislature. So we're in session during a long session from about January through the end of April when we do a budget, and then in a short session from January through the end of April. I'm sorry, January through the middle of March and a short one. So thank you so much, Nancy. I'll throw it back to you.
Okay. Jessica, can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Yes, so I'm the Associate State Director for Communications for the state of Nebraska. So I oversee all of our strategic communications, marketing, public relations initiatives for the state. I also work very closely with our community partners and vendors to help get the word out about not only our events and our advocacy efforts, but also our AARP Fraud Watch Network, because I'm the lead for the state for that, overseeing our AARP Nebraska Speakers Bureau. So we go out and give presentations that last up to an hour in length. And one of our top rated presentations that we offer is the Spotting Scams, Protect Your Identity and Your Wallet. So really out there helping educate and support our advocacy efforts.
Okay, thank you. Jina, what is your role?
Thanks, Nancy. And a lot has already been kind of said of what I was going to say, and so not to belabor, but I am Jina Ragland at the AARP Nebraska State Office, Associate State Director of Advocacy and Outreach here in the state. And primarily my job is running the legislative and a lot of our advocacy agenda at the local, state, and federal levels. And so as Ambre and Jess talked about, we have volunteers that really are the backbone of the work that we do. Not only at the legislative level, but again, at the state, local level, and then at the federal level. And so all of those kind of parts a lot of times overlap with a lot of our volunteers and the work that we're doing. But primarily, we're trying to be out in communities, listening to our membership, that 50 and older, and even that intergenerational concept, and figuring out how we can continue to allow Nebraskans and all Americans to age in place how they want to age. So thanks for having me today.
Okay, and thank you. And just for those of you who don't know, since I'm a native Nebraskan, Nebraska is the only state in the union that has a unicameral. So things don't go back and forth between houses, they are where they are. So, um, the cryptocurrency kiosks are usually found in grocery stores, gas stations, and laundromats, and they look like an ordinary ATM, but crypto machines are a favorite target of and tool of criminals because virtual money is not backed by the government and or a central bank, and it's hard to trace cryptocurrency in the possession of a scammer. So can you three talk a little bit about what cryptocurrency is, does, and how it got out there?
Sure. I mean,
Anyone?
I can kind of start it off and then I'll let Jess and Amber kind of fill in some of the blanks along the way. But primarily, and again, I think it's really important for people to understand and know ARP's policy. We have nothing against cryptocurrency. There's a time and a place. A lot of people are using it online to do an exchange of money and that sort of thing. But where we really got involved and really consider it the piece where we were concerned is the cryptocurrency kiosk fraud, the machines themselves. And the more and more research and the data that we have and we know, cryptocurrency kiosk machines really don't serve a purpose other than maybe for our unbanked populations, but really started to be a kind of a point for scammers and fraudsters to really target people. I think that the thing that's really important for people to remember is the difference between an ATM and a cryptocurrency kiosk. You'll see these machines in these retail facilities, but the difference here is an ATM machine is you're taking your own money out, whereas with a crypto machine, you're actually taking dollar bills and money and you're putting it into the machine. And then once it's into the machine, it basically disappears because that money then is converted through a fiat, is what we call it. And again, electronically, it goes out and it's gone. The other thing I'll mention really briefly, again, they can be deceiving about, what the uses are and that sort of thing. The tactics haven't changed really from the scamming point of view of how they're getting people to become victims of scam. It's just now actually having people go with these stacks of money and putting money into the machines as a way of, taking advantage of people. So again, cryptocurrency serves a purpose, and we're going to continue to see more and more in the United States and across the world, the virtual use of money transfers and that sort of thing. Again, ARP's policy has nothing. We don't have a policy that stands against cryptocurrency. It's basically the uses of these machines that is proven now to actually be taking advantage of people and stealing money from them.
And
Okay.
if you don't mind, really quick, I just wanted to reiterate what Jina said, because I think we were also very intentional just to make sure that we were separating out the actual legitimate use of cryptocurrency and talking about how these kiosks are being used for fraud. So it was never really about cryptocurrency itself, and I just appreciate Jina mentioning that. So I just wanted to reiterate that so that we knew kind of what we were talking about, what we're dealing with, and why these kiosks were really the item of what criminals were using to go through, and it just happened to be that they were using the cryptocurrency for that. But thank you, Jina, for that.
Okay. Jess, anything to add?
I would just say, Gina mentioned the scams are the same. They're just using these kiosks as the new medium instead of asking for gift cards or, a wire transfer. But it's highly organized crime. These scammers, they literally have playbooks that they're utilizing to drive people, play off their emotions, to make them scared and panic. And so we just really emphasize, to pause, stop, reflect, and think about what's being asked, and to always verify at a trusted number before you go to one of these machines, because they're trying to play off urgency and your emotions.
Okay. Um, is playing off emotions, and I'm thinking negative emotions. What is the major draw to cryptocurrency and the kiosks, or are they exciting to some people? And is there an age group that these scammers are really going after?
I would say cryptocurrency is very much still kind of an unknown subject for most people. They don't fully understand it. So maybe there's possible intrigue there, or they see people on TV doing it or creating their own, you know, cryptocurrency, so to speak. But I think why the scammers like it is because it's hard to trace back. And they can open a digital wallet and play off that, oh, you don't know how to open a wallet. I'll open one for you. If it's a pig butchering scam, keep, sending money here with a promise of high returns because we're building our future together. When really it's a scammer, and there is no future together. And when you run out of money, they will cut you off, and that's where the term comes from. So they're really playing off that unknownness. If it's not something where they're like, to settle your debt right now on a warrant that's out for your arrest, or, a family member of yours is needing money and in danger, things like that.
Okay.
And I would just add too that, the speed and anonymity that you were talking about, and the fact that these transactions are almost impossible to reverse, that there is no back button. So I think that that is also why, these kiosks are used so much in these scams. And then also I think, Nancy, you mentioned or asked, is there a specific age group that's targeted? And I would say, when it comes to who is mostly impacted, what we have seen, through AARP's fraud work is that the older adults are definitely disproportionately affected, especially when it comes to financial losses. Many have accumulated retirement savings over a lifetime, so it makes them attractive for targets on that. But also, I would say that something that we also, tell people over and over is that anyone can be scammed. So, this is not. It can be people of all ages. Sometimes people are like, well, how does this happen? And it's like, well, it's because they instill that fear, that urgency in what's happening. And really, it can occur to anybody, but we've found that it really is the older adult population that is most affected.
Okay. Jina, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add, and I think I love data. So I think throwing it out, and again, part of the reason we've pursued in the way that we have with some of this legislation and the oversight, the FBI does put out an Internet Crime Complaint Center report every year. It's called the IC3 report. And we've kind of been watching that for several years. And again, this encompasses all forms of fraud. But interestingly enough, in 2025, the FBI's IC3 report received over 13,460 complaints involving crypto kiosks, which was staggeringly a 21% increase from 2024 of 181,000. So Americans are reporting over $389 million in stolen funds. And that's an increase from 2024 at 11.36 billion. So I think it's important. Again, data means one thing, but also is the underreporting. There's a lot more than that. And again, we'll probably talk about this along the way in the podcast, but the main thing, one message for people listening today is if you are a victim of this, or even if you didn't fall for it, it's really important to report these kinds of scams to law enforcement, because the more that it's reported, the more we know and the more we can gather. But again, at the end of the day, the number of money or the amount of money that's been stolen is far more than what I even just talked about, because the underreporting is a lot less than that. And Amber hit it really, right. It is older adults that are primarily being scammed, mostly with the crypto machines. However, with scams and fraud in general, I think it's also important to remember a lot of younger generations are actually scammed at higher numbers, but the older people, 60 and older, oftentimes are scammed at higher amounts of money. And really, again, that makes sense because of the nest egg that they built. And maybe the vulnerability, and sometimes they're more targeted because the scammers know that they might have more of a nest egg or more financial security than those at a younger age.
Okay, thank you. AARP is really doing a good job of explaining cryptocurrency scams to its members and to the general public. And so I want to ask you a little bit about how your particular state office started dealing with this, what tripped your trigger, so to speak. And so, Amber, since I've met you before and we've talked a little bit in person, I'm going to start with you. How did Indiana get involved in this?
Yes, thank you. I think this story is very special because it started at the local level. We were contacted by Detective Sergeant Nathan Bankley from the Evansville Police Department in the financial crimes and auto theft units, who was really seeing these scams happen in real time. Older Hoosiers were losing thousands and thousands of dollars through these crypto kiosks, and he knew that something needed to change, but no one was listening to him. And so he had reached out to us. And at the same time, our volunteer legislative team was gearing up for the 2026 legislative session. And we knew that we were hearing from law enforcement and through AARP's Fraud Watch Network that Hoosiers were being harmed and that we needed to take more action and take it fast. So I would say that we decided to do a sort of a two-pronged approach because scammers were not letting up. We knew that if we waited until our session, that might have still been too long to wait to try to do something. So we decided to try to pass a local ordinance and build that momentum at the same time to a statewide law. We brought together local Evansville volunteers, staff members, local officials, law enforcement to really bring forth and successfully pass a local ordinance that placed many consumer protections as possible on the ATMs, although we knew that that local ordinance wasn't something that was going to protect Hoosiers as much as the statewide law could. But we knew that that was just one step. So Evansville became the first community in Indiana to pass a local ordinance regulating crypto kiosks. The local success was incredibly important, at least for as far as not only community members in that area, but also for Hoosiers statewide, because this really led to our work doing the statewide work. And we were able to say, you know, this gave us a foundation to talk to lawmakers and demonstrate that this was not just happening in Evansville. It was also happening in communities across Indiana. And we could point to real victims, real cases, and express that these were their constituents that were being harmed. And from there, I want to just mention our volunteers were instrumental. Our volunteer legislative team helped to build the awareness that we educated lawmakers at every turn as to why consumer protections were needed. We participated in advocacy efforts and responded to action alerts and really helped elevate the issue statewide. And without our volunteers, as Jina mentioned earlier, they really are the backbone of our work. This legislation began as an attempt to really protect consumers with guardrails such as licensing, daily and monthly transaction limits for users, and capping the fees that were being applied to folks. And that's how we really started out with our conversation. It passed in our House of Representatives. And then when it got to the Senate, they actually took it a step further. And this shows exactly how I feel like advocacy is supposed to work. You know, we were a concerned law enforcement officer came to talk to us, but then it was elevated by community members, our volunteers, local officials there, and then eventually championed by legislators for a statewide law. So what started as a local conversation in Evansville really ultimately became a statewide effort culminating in Indiana becoming the first state in the nation to ban crypto kiosks entirely because of their role in this fraud. Our Governor Braun signed the bill into law, and it took effect immediately upon signature. We had nearly 900 of these machines before we banned them here. And for me, that's the real story. It's not just about the bill, but it's about what can happen when we all come together and really focus on a topic with volunteers, community partners, and just come together on a common goal to really help individuals. So one conversation led to a local ordinance, that ordinance then led to a statewide movement. And then today, Hoosiers across Indiana really are safer because of it. So I just wanted to just mention that this would not have happened without our volunteer base.
Thank you. Gina and Jess, I understand that this movement in Nebraska started in Omaha, which for those of you who are not in Nebraska is the largest city in the state and not too far from the state capital. How did things get going in Nebraska?
So I'll start in similar kind of story as Amber was talking about. You know, Nebraska was actually approached by a city council member from the Omaha City Council, as well as Douglas County Sheriff Aaron Hansen, who kind of were starting to see these types of scams, really escalate at a very high level in the Omaha, Douglas County, Sarpy County, that sort of area. And actually, Amy Melton, who's the city council member that really kind of took the bull by the horns, you could say, in putting the initiative together with the ordinance. She's an attorney by trade, and so she actually had a family member that was affected by this type of fraud. And so when that happened, she kind of stepped in and she said, we can't let this keep happening. So she kind of partnered up with Sheriff Hansen that I just talked about, and brought forward to the Omaha City Council the first ordinance here in the state, and is actually one of the first ordinances that passed nationally again, it wasn't banning the machines as what has happened in Indiana, but really was kind of not so much, taking forward education, but also providing the requirements for signage on these machines. And then even more than that was some responsibility from at the local level for those retailers who were allowing those machines to be put into their retail facilities, to have some ownership of, if you're going to allow them in your facility, you have to have a sign up that provides some kind of warning signs for people. And what came and carried along with that is it actually provided that there would be a $500 fine if they were caught without that signage on those machines. And so that was passed in late 2024 and went into effect towards the end of 2024. And from there, then when we really got involved with that, and I'll kind of let Jess talk about the grandma posse, fraud posse that has happened in Omaha, the Omaha area, as a result of that. But just kind of following along the story, then we knew that this was not, as Amber said, this was more than just a city issue. But we needed to kind of look to see what we could do on a state level. And so we worked with Elliot Bostar, District 29 here in the Lincoln area, and said, do you realize this industry does not have any oversight, licensure? The Department of Banking has, it's like the Wild Wild West. They're running around and there's no licensure requirements under the Money Transmitters Act. And so that was one of our first pieces that kind of caught his eye. But also then requiring the licensure, they had to be registered with the department also, because again, a lot of people, the only way you can find out where these machines are is if you do Google searches. And so there was just, again, nowhere for any authority, such as the Department of Banking, to have that oversight to figure out where these were located. And so in addition to that, similar to what was done or introduced in Indiana, again, we don't have a full ban here, but we were able to pass limits on transaction limits for daily transactions for new customers, as well as existing customers. We were also able to establish specifically in statute what a new customer is defined as. We were also able to put into place specific disclosures and warnings to customers, again, what had to be included, the disclosures and that sort of thing. Probably two of the other big things that we really take a lot of pride here in Nebraska was also on the capping of fees. And I don't think a lot of people always understand, when you use a cryptocurrency kiosk machine, there is a fee that's charged to you for whatever that transaction might be. And so oftentimes it's upwards of 20 or 30%. Here in Nebraska, we were able to cap it at 18% of a total transaction, which is still quite a bit of money. But it's still less than that 30%. So, and then the last thing I'll mention, in basic with the passage of the bill we had here in Nebraska, and this is where we probably fought the hardest and really were not willing to compromise, was on the issuance of refunds. And now customers have the ability, if a transaction has taken place and they're a new customer and they realize after the fact that it's fraud, they then can contact the machine's owner. They can also contact the Department of Banking, and then the other is contacting law enforcement and filing a complaint. Again, and then their money can be refunded, and that comes back from the industry themselves on the refund of that. So that was passed and went into effect in 2025. And then the other, and last, I'll wrap this up here real quickly, but we also have continued to do a lot of work and citywide with city ordinances. And really people are like, well, if you have a state law, why do you need the city ordinance? And really our argument there is that this provides, again, another layer, most importantly, the education piece, but also a layer for local enforcement, local law enforcement, where again, these city ordinances kind of overlap what's going on at the state level with the requirements of the signs on the machines. But for us, it was then you have a local number that people can call, which almost even gives more reassurance. If I call my local law enforcement, it's a little bit more of a security blanket. Also gives, again, local law enforcement the ability to oversee this. And again, the other then is the retailer has some skin in the game. Whereas with the state law, the fine is not on the retailer themselves, it's actually on the industry, where the local ordinances then put that fine on the retailer. If they're found to not have that signage, then they can be charged up to the $500 per day until the sign's put back on. So we continue to work. We actually have another ordinance coming up actually tomorrow night in another location. We have passed ordinances in Lincoln, Omaha, and Grand Island, some of our three biggest cities in the state. And we'll continue to do that. There is a talk and entertainment about looking at a potential possible full ban, like what's been done in Indiana, as the next step here in Nebraska. The one thing I'll also mention, and then I'm going to pass it to Jess to kind of talk on the volunteer side with the fraud workers, is the refund piece. We know it is working. We have regular conversations with the Department of Banking. This went into effect at the state in September, and from September through March, they had reported over $200,000 in refunds had been given. Again, these are people that have just reported, knowing there's a lot more that haven't. And then we were just notified by the Grand Island local police last week that there was, because of the ordinance and the signage, someone was saved from being frauded out of $8,000 at one of these machines last week. So lots going on here in Nebraska, similar to Indiana. Again, each state is doing things a little bit differently, but I think we all have the end goal as that protecting of the consumer. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Jess to talk about some of the volunteer side.
Thank you, Gina. So yes, Sheriff Aaron Hansen, following the passage of the ordinance, had the idea for what he was calling a grandma posse. And we weren't crazy about the name because we're like, grandma. And he's like, well, anybody that has a grandma, knows a grandma, like grandpas are welcome too. And so we ended up changing the name early on to the AARP Nebraska Fraud Fighters. But what we did was we brought in our volunteers, because we have such a large volunteer pool, and invited them into the law enforcement office, where they received a specialized training from financial fraud investigators, also from the sheriff and from AARP as well, on the status of what's happening and how they can help educate others in community outreach. And so after really opening their eyes to a lot of this additional insider information by law enforcement, they signed up for different groups that would go out into the community with a map of these locations. As Gina said, we had to pull all of them through research and searches. There's not like a go-to spot that lists all these different branded machines. And so we split them up by geographical area and used Google Earth to pin map the path that they would go. And we had report slips and then the warning stickers that they were going to place on the machines. And so they went out over a period of a day or 3 days, depending on how many locations for their group and their group's availability, and went into these locations and asked the store manager or owner or employee to place it on the machine and help educate them, and provided them a slip with a QR code that directed them to more information about the ordinance and the different law enforcement agencies, whether in Lincoln or Omaha or Grand Island, did spin up a web page themselves, showing the sticker and explaining what would happen if it was not posted, and had all the information and statistics about cryptocurrency. And so it was very successful. It's something that can be replicated in communities across the state, and having that volunteer involvement and having them say, people in your community who are 50 and older are, being targeted by bad actors, bringing them to these machines, and we really need to help educate, and that's gonna, continue to happen. And so it was a really great outreach effort.
Okay, thank you. This is just amazing at how complicated it is and how important it is, and the effort that AARP has put in to this problem. Now that you've got things in place, I'm wondering, are you starting to see a decline in cryptocurrency scams in Indiana and Nebraska?
I know from our side, Nancy, because, and I also just wanted to say, without other states coming before Indiana, we wouldn't have been as successful as what we did either. I think that, the more that had worked on it before us, and then even states that are coming after us, I really think that this is really sweeping across the nation. And I just wanted to say that what you all have done in Nebraska is amazing. So what we have done as far as, are these still happening? Because we banned them, I will say that the operators were able to shut down their kiosks remotely. So, like I said, when Governor Braun signed our bill, it was law that very day. The next day, Detective Van Cleve, who we had been working with out of Evansville, he and his team went out on Tuesday just to double check to see how this was working. Almost every location he went to, the machines had a sign on it that either talked about the bill that had just passed and why it was shut down, or it just basically said out of order. And so one of the things that he will continue to talk about is that what his phone was doing before this ban, and not having to cry with folks on the phone and tell them that he cannot revive their money or recoup their money. Obviously scams are still happening and criminals are finding different ways to do it. But this particular one, he was like, it was overnight. I mean, I haven't, he hasn't taken another complaint from someone for being scammed through these kiosks because we were able to shut them down completely. And I think that story is just unreal, especially for, individuals just across the state of Indiana that could have been scammed, and also ones that have been. Hopefully it would not be able to happen again. So.
Okay. And in Nebraska, have you seen a decline in
Yeah,
scam?
and little of what I said previously, Nancy, again, we meet with the Department of Banking regularly, and all I have to do is, email the director and say, where are we at on the refund status? And it's always that number continues to keep growing, as well as, again, the oversight. And I think the biggest win for no matter whether they're banned or not, is the licensure and that oversight. And so, again, trying to figure out where those bad actors are and that sort of thing. But from Nebraska's perspective, again, the refund piece is where we weigh a lot of our success there. I would say at the local level, yes, we have met with, and again, the nice thing is with relationship building and, community involvement at the city level, with all the the city councils that we've met with. And then again, those key partners like Amy Melton with the city council, and Aaron Hansen, again, the deputy with the sheriff's office. They're reporting and looking at that. And yes, the numbers are continuing to decline, even on just cryptocurrencies fraud in general. Again, there is the kiosks, primarily what we're working on, but the other, Lincoln, again, we just had a meeting with them and the city council a few weeks ago. And again, their numbers are also showing down, especially in the cryptocurrency kiosk area. And then, as I said, last week, we got a nice email from the Grand Island Police Department, again, talking about how this has helped save some money for one person individually, but we know that there's a lot more. But I think really the win there is, and probably for me, the biggest oversight is always that education of the consumer. And so, yes, we passed all this legislation and people are saving money or being stopped. But I think the biggest thing is that stop and pause that Jess talked about. Again, even if you're calling somebody, you're in that panic emotional state, remember to just stop and pause. And if you don't know, there is those numbers that you can now call. And I think that's the biggest thing that we do with ARP. Our responsibility is making sure that when we pass these things, that people have the education and the outreach and they understand. And so I think, again, boots on the ground with our volunteers and the messaging that we do, I think that's really the critical piece here for us.
Okay. Anything else to add, Jess?
No, I think she summed it up pretty well.
Okay. One of the questions I had was, why would particularly an older person, I hate to say that, but I am an older person, go into a bank and say, pull out $10,000 in cash? Wouldn't that raise a red flag to a bank?
I think it definitely does. And the Department of Banking is doing a lot of education with the banks and different banking associations.
Okay.
Fraud is very much a topic of importance right now. And so a lot of educational pieces and formal trainings are happening at that level so that they can question them, or perhaps they even have an official contact of record where a representative from the bank can reach out to, maybe it's their adult child, or maybe it's a sibling, to just kind of question or ask. And so that's an extra safety protocol there as well.
Okay.
And I would say, Nancy, real quick too, I think one of the things to make sure that we are explaining to everyone is these scammers are very sophisticated. And so when they are on the phone with these individuals, they're telling them what to say. Don't talk to anybody. Don't say this, or oh, tell them that you're buying a car. Like they are also just being very strong on the other end of that line so that there is no, while there might be a red flag and someone at the bank is questioning them, et cetera, that scammer is just really running the scene behind there. So I also feel like they're very much under control by that individual, and so they're saying other things that are not normal. They're trying to get around the fact that they don't want anybody to know as to why they're doing this because that's what they're being told. So that's also kind of what's happening behind the scenes as well.
Okay.
Nancy, I would just add real
Oh,
quick. We also have, in Nebraska, we have, and I know these are happening in other states, but that unification, and I think that's a really good message also, is that this isn't just an AARP work problem.
yeah.
This is a coalition of lots of community partners at the state level. I mean, the governor, the attorney general, as Jess mentioned, we have all the banking associations are at the table, Better Business Bureau, all sorts of partners, all coming together. And even here in Nebraska, we're really trying to even be more unified in our messaging. Because I think that's sometimes the problem also with fraud prevention is the siloing. We all have our own messaging. We're all doing our own thing, but as we come together and we start being more unified on these kinds of actions, the stronger we become. And again, more trusted sources and that sort of thing. So again, those partnerships are critical. And I think, again, that's how we all become successful is when we work together like that.
Okay. And I assume it's safe to say that educating on cryptocurrency is going to keep going on, and we'll see what the future has in store for all of this. Before we go, as we wind down, I would like each one of you to fill in with anything that you feel needs to be said that hasn't been said already. You three have been great interviewees. So Jess, anything else you'd like to add?
I would just say that artificial intelligence is taking scams to a new level through deep fakes, to voice cloning, to just being able to source information that's about you that's available out there publicly. These scammers are using AI to find recently widowed people of a certain financial means. They are finding out names of your children so they can use that to fake an emergency. Just really, again, that stop, pause, reflect, protect. AI is going to continue to get more sophisticated and help aid these scammers. And in the pig butchering scenario, you never meet them face to face, and they want to bring things, into a WhatsApp or a Signal or something that's not as monitored. And you might ask for a picture of something because they're leading this fabulous lifestyle that you want to be a part of. And there's long gaps because either they claim that they're serving as a volunteer in a third world country, or they're working on an oil rig, or they're in the military service. But also, part of that gap is they're using that playbook, they're using AI to generate that image to then maybe show you, oh, this is what I did today, or here's this. They need that time gap. And so AI is becoming a big key piece into these scams.
Okay. Jina, anything else to add?
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off what Jess said. Again, my message always when I'm out talking to consumers is that pause and reflect. There's nothing that emergent, a phone call, an email, anything that you can't stop. Hang up the phone, ask for a callback number, check into it before you actually make the transaction. Even if they're threatening, that your grandchild is in jail and that, you have to post bond. They will, the minute you say that, they're likely going to hang up anyway. And that's another red flag. They want the immediate and they want to keep you. And again, as Amber talked about earlier, when you're at those kiosks, don't get off the phone. Don't say that. I mean, they are talking to you and coaching you the entire time. And so again, I know sometimes it's easier said than done, but it's that pause and call your local law enforcement, call your local bank, get somebody to reassure you that that is or isn't a fraudulent transaction. And again, there's nothing so urgent that you can't hang up or you can't pause and call them back. And again, when you ask for a phone number to call back, usually they're going to hang up on.
Okay, thank you. And Amber, you get the last word.
Well, I would just say that while we are all so proud of everything that we're doing, fraud prevention is never finished, right? So I'd say that if I'd want, besides what Gina and Jess have already said, I would just want volunteers listening to take away that, your voice matters. So even if you're not being scammed, but you want to help others, I think this campaign, both of our campaigns have started with people paying attention to, what was happening in their communities. They were very in tune to that. It grew because volunteers wanted to take action and our law enforcement shared their expertise and legislators were listening to us. And I think that, as ARP, we are sort of that connector and collaborator, and we brought everybody together to sort of move forward. So I would just say these stories remind me of, really how concerns can be elevated through those partnerships, through strong grassroots involvement, and just that real change can happen. So I just say your voices matter and help join us on the journey.
Okay, thank you. This has been a great interview. You all have done a wonderful job. And if you are watching this on YouTube or listening on your favorite platform, we encourage you to share this information with other volunteers and staff. The Roost News has been around for a while, and we're trying to just share the intelligence and the wealth all over the country. So do pay attention to what we have been doing. And we thank you very much for listening.